This is part 2 of my Antietam trip. The first part, we were talking about the Union, how they started attack from Hooker at the left side, outside Sharpsburg, which is how the South saw this battle as Sharpsburg. The North will call it Antietam because it gets fought around Antietam Creek. This will take place more in the center. There's Sumner actually attacked and actually was able to actually make stunning progress. And of course, the Burnside on the far left. Okay, here we are. I skipped the tour stop. The last tour stop was actually right there. If you can see that house, it's called Mumbai or whatever farm. And it really doesn't have much to it. It's just to point out that the South burned down all these structures so that the Union couldn't use them for sharpshooters. But I guess there's the visitor center up there. Just over there, over the top of that, that's the North. That's where the battle started. Over there would be like, over there would be where the battle started and the West Woods. Over there would be the East Woods. Right over there would be the cornfield. But after that, around 9:30, 10 o'clock, the battle started to shift further south. So we're on the west, the kind of the east of the Confederate lines, okay? And what it was is several divisions under French started marching across this land over towards there to where the sunken road would be. Apparently, the people in this division who marched across there, most of them, like 75% of them, had only been in the Army for about 2 weeks and had just signed up. And they marched over this land. There was a cornfield here, so they did have the corn cover, although that's not exactly like anything that's going to stop a bullet. And they engaged the Confederates in the sunken road, which gave the Confederates a huge advantage in the volley. And they said they fought there for about 90 minutes, just firing back and forth at each other. So this was the next stage of the battle. I'm at the sunken road. As you can see here, pretty easy. The Confederates were in the sunken road, and they came right in by French and Richard, who traveled over that field. And as you can see right here, it was a sunken road. The road just sinks down. That's where all the Confederates were, about 5,000 of them. They would later get reinforced. The Union would come right over those hills and fire at point-blank range. For like, I guess, 90 minutes they exchanged fire. The Confederates getting the best exchanges, obviously, because they had the cover. Eventually, the Union's overwhelming numbers and the Irish Brigade that actually went up there and then were able to fire down into the sunken road. And the Confederates, in all the smoke and confusion or whatnot, eventually had to retreat out. But at the end of the sunken road, which lasted from basically 10 o'clock to 1 p.m., the Confederates lost 3,000, the Union 10,000. Just to show you how devastating cover could have been back then. So, let's see who this monument's for. Is this to the Union or to the Confederates? Two generals were actually killed here. One got hit in the ankle, ended up getting infected and dying. Oh, Pennsylvania. That's to one of the generals that died. Okay. All right. So this is the sunken road. As you can see, you would have a major advantage being down here over anyone coming over there. So amazing, some of the bravery from, they say the initial volley, they waited until the Union was very, very close and then opened up, because the initial wave of Union soldiers was basically 5,000 on 5,000. And if the Confederates waited until they were real close, so they had a definite, like almost point blank shooting, they would have caused tremendous casualties in the first couple waves. But then eventually the Union and the Confederates weren't really able to reinforce. So, sunken road. They even have like famous pictures of the sunken road that were taken afterwards, of just the piles of dead that were in the sunken road from the Confederates. And you just got to imagine all the Union, yeah, right here. There's the two pictures of the sunken road, just the number of dead. Those are Confederates. The Union would just been spread out all over the field. And this is only at 1 p.m. and we're already like a whole lot. You can see like they're putting it up. So here I am at the observation tower. It's right in the middle of the battlefield. They built it, I guess, in 1896 to teach cadets on the battle tactics or whatnot, on how to see the field. So unfortunately, it's locked. For whatever reason, you can't go up. Might have something to do with COVID. We have a monument to the Irish Brigade. This is the brigade which basically broke the sunken road. As you can see, the sunken road is right down there. I was just down there a second ago. Let's see here. And this is where the Irish Brigade came right up on this hill and started firing down into the sunken road. That's really what broke their backs. Let's see if I can... See, that would be over there. Even further out would be the west woods, the east woods, and the cornfields up there. I'm headed in this direction, south, which is where the end of the battle would be. The Irish Brigade commander was born, blah, 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 joined the Irish movement, liberate. They had a lot of Irish commanders, that's why they're called the Irish Brigade. He raised company, military distinction. After the war, he became a secretary and acting governor of the Montana Territory. He drowned in the Missouri River near Fort Bennington on July 1867. His body was never recovered. Well, that kind of sucks. All right. They paid for the tour. A private tour, I guess. Well, maybe, yeah, because I think the real tour didn't start until 10. It's like barely 10 now, so they wouldn't start here. So they paid for a private tour. As you can see, there was that small opportunity after the Union had taken the sunken road that they had already broken kind of the Lee's center. And if they had had the probably leadership to see what they had done and actually pushed forward, they could have had a really stunning victory over Lee at this point. But that was probably one of the North's kind of real drawbacks during the Civil War, is they didn't have the kind of leadership that the Confederacy had. The Confederacy had more aggressive generals who were able to operate a little more independently and were willing to take a lot more risks, and were rewarded with a lot of those risks that when they saw an opportunity, they exploited it. Burnside Bridge. This is the south end of the Union, of the Confederate, in the last, closing near the end of the battle. This is called Burnside Bridge because General Burnside was entrusted with trying to take it across. This was the only place where Lee stationed troops to try and stop him. As you can see, the Confederates would have been up on that hill, guarded in great defensive positions. Now, originally there were 7,000, but when the battle started up in the north, Lee moved his troops to the south, to up north, and so they stuck with 3,000. Now, Burnside had thousands of troops at his disposal. He sent some south to try and do a flanking maneuver because he looked and said, "Oh, I'm gonna get fucking whooped if I try and do this." Well, Rodman, trying to find a way, had a lot of trouble because he had crappy maps and he got lost and a whole bunch of stuff. So he was taking his sweet time. So at 10 a.m., because McClellan was screaming, "Get in the battle, get in the battle," he finally decided to attack. And each time he attacked, there were 3 assaults. The first 2 just took tons of heavy losses, because you can see, as soon as they came out from down those hills, they would be fired upon. So the first assault failed, the second assault failed, the third assault, they basically, from what they say, is they just came running on in, trying to run over the bridge. And basically the Confederates were running low on ammunition, so they had conceded the bridge and allowed them. Plus, Rodman finally found a way to cross south of here and was crossing the river, so they knew they were about to be flanked. So Burnside Bridge, they had to retreat. And just getting over this bridge, which would have been a freaking heavy-duty lift. Now, if you think, if you're looking here, it doesn't look that deep, but if you remember back in the day, the Union troops were wearing wool uniforms. Not only that, they had all their powder with them, and the creek bed is very slippery, and they didn't exactly have modern day shoes with grips or spikes. So it's quite likely if they tried to cross the creek on their own, what would have happened is that many of the soldiers probably might have slipped and fell, and as soon as their gunpowder got wet, they were done. Like, they became basically had expensive clubs with them. Here, the 51st New York Infantry. Yep. So this is Burnside's Bridge. This was later in the day, which all leads up to the final stop here. Actually, there's 2 more stops, but I'm not going to stop at the cemetery. I don't really care. But the final push that's what they call it. So let's walk over the bridge. Now, I have no idea how Antietam apparently means swift-moving water. So that's why it has real steep banks. I guess maybe in the spring or maybe the fall, it's a little deeper and moves a little faster, because right now it seems a little lackadaisical. But yeah, basically the Union realized they couldn't just march their men across. They absolutely had to walk across a bridge. So you can see, just look how steep it is. The Confederates would have had an overwhelming advantage, especially Union troops trying to run over this bridge and this just bottleneck. It would have been so easy just to, after a few valleys, the bridge would be like harder to transverse, just because of the number of bodies that would be on the bridge. Whew. Okay. Now, the far left was kind of more of an interesting thing, because if you knew about Antietam Creek, the creek itself, you'd think, well, they could just walk across. Well, they really couldn't. The Union couldn't just cross the creek, because the average soldier had a very leather shoe, which was very smooth on the bottom, and the creek would have had nice slimy rocks, and most of the soldiers would have been slipping and maybe falling, and as soon as their powder would get wet, they'd basically be unarmed. So they couldn't actually just walk across the creek, which a lot of people today would say, hey, would just march your army across the creek. The other thing that's pretty obvious is just the size of that hill. And mainly, Burnside was only able to get across because the Confederates were running out of ammo. And one of the things was just the amazing size of the hill that the Burnside had to deal with. Now, probably one of the bigger things was, well, Burnside really delayed as long as possible because he didn't want to attack, and when forced to attack, obviously he went at it. Oddly enough, he was right to not wanting to attack it, because he only moved them off because the Confederates ran out of ammunition. But if he did attack it earlier, he wouldn't have been surprised by troops coming up from the south, which stalled his advance. In reality, at the end of the day, Antietam, really the lines didn't move really that much, and Lee withdrew from the battlefield, and the Union would call it a victory. So right up here, this ridge is where the final push will begin, the final hours of the battle. Right over there is Burnside Bridge, as you can see on this map here. So after the Confederates, basically running out low on ammunition, had to concede the bridge and move back here at like 1 p.m. Okay, so they form again up along this ridge on this line. 10,000 Union troops cross the bridge, get out in front of them, and start marching upon them. This is at like 2 o'clock. They come up on them, and they're fighting with them. The Rebs are slowly being pushed back, and they can even start to see Sharpsburg back in those distance. They're being pushed back. Just then, as they're pushing them back, just outside the town, that's when A.P. Hill from Martha's Ferry, who'd been marching for 17 miles, finally arrives and hits them on their exposed flank and forces the Burnside's troops to retreat back. Now, as they retreat back, and it's like 4 or 5 p.m., they're reforming to maybe do another assault. The sun starts to set, and they can no longer fight. And that ends the day's battle. Throughout the night, it is very calm, eerily calm, and they just call it the Valley of Death. The next day, on the 18th, McClellan could have attacked to try and wipe out Lee's army, but he chooses not to. And in the evening, Robert E. Lee quietly slips across the river and retreats back. I forget what river it is. Slips across the river and goes back into the South. Now the Union. Now this is basically a draw. Neither side really won. I mean, I guess you could kind of say the Union did because they kind of pushed the Confederates back a bit, but no side had a really decisive advantage. So what ends up happening is Lincoln considers it a victory, calls it a victory, and issues an Emancipation Proclamation, which he needed a victory in order to use it. 23,000 people died, men died, which makes it the bloodiest day in all the Civil War. Some takeaways. McClellan was an awful general. He was always way too cautious. I mean, he could have attacked on September 18th to try and crush the rebel army. I mean, he had time to maybe scout out a good plan of attack because he had the river behind him. He didn't have any of those choke points to worry about, and he could have hit them. And many of the Confederates, he still had a larger army, but he always fought like he was on a disadvantage. It was really kind of McClellan's weakness. He would even win battles and treat it like a defeat. The other thing is at the sunken road, once he had pushed them off the sunken road, if he had poured troops in there, he would have cut Lee's army in two and probably crushed at least half of it. Again, he just didn't have the initiative. He could organize it just fine, but he just didn't have the initiative. Now, technically, the last stop here is the National Cemetery. Now, there's not a whole lot to it. I mean, when it was commissioned, it was Andrew Johnson showed up, the President of the United States showed up to help commission it, but there wasn't a whole lot there. So this is Antietam. Nice to visit these places. I do like it. I like getting my Civil War buff on. And those people taking the tour, they get a lot more information. But there were two things. It's like there was a lot of squandered opportunities by the Union here, and also a lot of luck. You know, you hate to say it, a lot of times battles are won by luck.